started to talk about AI quite a bit now on this channel. I never thought I would. I was anti-technology for much of my adult life, actually. I was very much against computers. I was what you call a Luddite. I didn't really go for technology, and I still think that technology is has a lot of problems. But at the same time, I've come more in the center, right? I think that technology has its usefulness, and it can be used as a tool that can be of help to people. It can also be used, and it can be misused and abused, and AI, definitely, right? Let's look at what just happened with Elon Musk and Grok. And I talked about this in my last video, but even more came out since then, since I did my last video. This whole thing about how Elon programmed Grok, or he had someone else, he might not have done it himself, but he gave the order for Grok to be programmed in such a way that it is more right-wing conservative in its views, and even you might say Hitler-esque. Right? It's like saying anti-Semitic things and promoting Hitler, basically, which is bizarre, that you would see that from AI. That's why now I don't know if I'm ever going to use Grok, right? But I like the name Grok. I think that's a cool name for AI, but I doubt that I'm going to use it. I've been using Google AI, which I think is, what is it called? Gemini, right? And then I've been using Perplexity and DeepSeek. There's other ones like Claude. There's a lot of different AI systems out there. I don't know which is really the best, if there is a best. I don't know which is the most unbiased, but I do think that AI has a lot, right, to offer. I just think that you have to be careful when you use it. You have to be careful of your own bias, and you also have to, not just take what it says at face value, but you have to think about what it's saying. Is this really, it sounds good, but is it really accurate? And I made a point to say that a lot of the quotes, it puts quotes, things in quotes often, and a lot of those quotes are not real quotes, right? Which is, problematic, that it puts, for example, it puts things from the Course in quotes that are not quotes from the Course. And I've been talking about this, how AI definitely gets quotes, paraphrases a lot of things. It's not incorrect a lot of times, but sometimes it is actually just not in the Course and not what the Course would say. So that's where you have to be very careful, especially if you are using AI to help you to understand A Course in Miracles. I would actually just start with A Course in Miracles, right? And forget about AI until you learn more about A Course in Miracles, and then you can use AI to see what it has to say about things. But anyway, what I asked AI today was about the Bible codes, which are these codes that were discovered in the Bible that seem to show, it seemed to predict events. There were a couple, maybe 2 or 3 best-selling books. One was called The Bible Code, I believe. I forget the author's name. Came out in the 90s, and I was in Jerusalem in the early 90s, and I took this seminar called the Discovery Program. And basically this Discovery Program is an attempt to marshal all the evidence for the truth and the validity of the Bible. The Torah is the Word of God, right? The Torah is a divine document, and Jews in particular should all be Orthodox and follow and practice let's say practice, but observe the commandment, which are called the mitzvot of the Torah. Then there's 613 commandments. And I was 22 when I did this program, and I was, even though I had been trained in philosophy and I had been, trained at an Ivy League school, and I could think critically, I was kind of flabbergasted by this program. And I was like, I was thinking critically and I was skeptical, but I was also like, how is this possible? And maybe it's true, right? And it convinced me at the time to become Orthodox. And I did have this feeling of, yes, this is it. I have found the truth, right? And it took me a couple of years to get over that, actually. But I went back to the States, and I realized I really can't be an Orthodox Jew, Now I would say I'm a paradox Jew, right? Paradox meaning beyond belief. I've gotten beyond believing this or that. If anything, I think the Bible is an amazing document. I think there is a mystique and a mystery to the Bible that you can't deny, and there's some amazing stories there, some very profound stories with a lot of depth and a lot of color and richness. But I would not base my life on the Bible, right? I think the Bible is just not. It's not. It's not across the board. It's not consistent, I would say. I mean, it's relatively consistent in many ways, but there's definitely things about the Bible that I think we kind of cringe about now. We would not follow these things in the Bible, like things that involve genocide, and slavery, and treatment of women, and homosexuality, and all these other things that we are right to question, and we are questioning. On the other hand, as I was saying, I wouldn't go the other direction and just say it's all bullshit, right? I don't think that's the right approach either. So I asked DeepSeek AI about the Bible codes. What's the current research show about these Bible codes? What I had heard even back then was, well, you can find these codes in any work of literature, right? You just it's kind of arbitrary, actually. So here's what AI says: the Bible codes, divine proof or statistical sleight of hand. What are the Bible codes? The Bible codes, or equidistant letter sequences, or it's also called ELS for short, claim that hidden messages, names, dates, and events are encrypted in the Hebrew Torah by skipping letters at fixed intervals. Famous example, the assassination of Yitzchak Rabin. I actually mentioned this to AI. In 1995 was allegedly predicted in Deuteronomy by skipping every 4,772nd letter. Right? So if you skip every, at that rate, it actually has a code that shows that Rabin is going to be assassinated. Supporters argue the odds of this being random are astronomical. The case for the code, statistical claims. Mathematicians like Doron Witzum and Eliyahu Rips published a 1994 paper in Statistical Science arguing the codes defy chance. Example, they found clusters of rabbis' names and birth death dates encoded near their biographies. Now that's pretty amazing. Aish HaTorah's discovery argument, this is the program I took in Jerusalem, put on by this group called Aish HaTorah, which means the fire of the Torah. No human could have embedded these patterns 3,000 years ago. It must be divine, right? It must be divine. The case against the codes, the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. If you search any long text like Moby Dick or War and Peace, with flexible rules, you'll find codes. Famous debunking mathematician Brendan McKay found predictions of Princess Diana's death and the moon landing in Moby Dick. Statistician David Thomas replicated codes in the Hebrew translation of Don Quixote. No predictive power. The Rabin prediction was only noticed after the event. So in other words, why care about these codes if you're only going to know what happened after the fact? But I think the people that support the codes would say that it just shows that the Torah is divine, right? You can look after the fact and you can see that this was predicted by the Torah. It's in there. Everything is in there. So that's not necessarily a good argument, I don't think. Peer review backlash, later studies, for example, McKay et al. 1999, failed to replicate Whitsom and Ripp's results with stricter controls. The current scientific consensus, bogus but fun. The National Academy of Sciences, MIT, and Harvard statisticians dismissed the codes as data mining, meaning cherry-picking patterns. Key flaw, the original studies allowed retroactive tweaking of search parameters, for example, adjusting skip lengths until something fits. Why it feels convincing, apophenia. Humans excel at seeing patterns even where none exist. For example, seeing faces in clouds. Confirmation bias. Believers ignore misses. 99% of searches yield nonsense and highlight hits. That's pretty damning evidence, I would say. But we'd have to really look closely at this. I tend to think that there's probably something to it, and yet it's also ultimately not proof that this is divine, right? On the other hand, you could say that maybe everything is divine, right? Right, and you can find these things everywhere, right? You can find patterns everywhere if you look for them, and we do find patterns, right? This is where synchronicity comes in. For example, I've had some very interesting synchronicities in my life happen, but I wouldn't necessarily, like someone who sees synchronicities, they're looking for meaning, they're looking for patterns, right? That's not necessarily bad. You could say, well, it's not that they're looking for patterns, but they're open to patterns. And I think the patterns are there, right? I think there are interesting patterns in the universe that are happening, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that as a Jewish person, for example, I need to follow the Torah because it's the word of God, and it's has all these codes in it, and that means that it's divine. I believe that there is some divinity to it, actually, divinely inspired at the very least, just like A Course in Miracles, but that doesn't mean that you have to follow it 100%. So ACIM's take, if ACIM were to talk about the Bible codes, here's what it would say according to AI. The ego loves hidden messages. It's how it keeps you distracted from the only code that matters. Forgiveness unlocks heaven. Parallel, just as the Bible codes find meaning in randomness, the ego finds guilt in innocence. It's interesting. Why this matters for your book. For seekers, shows how intellectual proofs like codes can be spiritual detours. For skeptics, reinforces question everything, even miracles. For you, a chance to reflect on why the codes hooked you. Was it truth or the thrill of certainty? This is a very important point. I think AI is right about that. I had this certain thrill about finding the truth, and I was like, yes, I found the truth. This is the truth. Right? Final line, the Torah's real code isn't in skipped letters. It's a space between your fear and your forgiveness. I'll mention one other thing that I asked AI after this. there's something in Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism, or the main branch of Jewish mysticism. It's called Kabbalah. People say Kabbalah. In Hebrew, it's really Kabbalah. Kabbalah is very interesting. It's like, the mystics of Judaism are the Kabbalists, and they use numerology, and it's something called gematria, where they take each letter of the Hebrew alphabet has a numerical value, like Aleph, Bet, Gimel, right? 1, 2, 3. Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3, and so on. And then they see what words are equal numerically, or what groups of words are equal numerically, and then they show patterns, right? So one interesting gematria is, this is one of many, is in Hebrew, the word nachash and the word Mashiach are both 358. That's the numerical value. That's very interesting, that the word nachash, is snake or serpent, like the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the snake in the Garden of Eden, and Mashiach, meaning the Messiah, are equal. That's a very interesting, what do you call it? Coincidence, right? Or you could say synchronicity, or parallel, or maybe not. What's the word? The fact that they're the same numerical value is interesting, right? And this is AI's interpretation. The serpent temptation and Messiah redemption are two sides of the same cosmic process. And you could also say the serpent actually represents wisdom as well, right? This is you could really think about this, and maybe at some point I will talk more about it, but all right. I think that's enough for this today. What happened with Grok becoming basically really out of control with its anti-Semitic comments shows the dangers of AI. It's not AI though, it's the humans that program it. So AI is just a tool. AI is a neutral thing. It's what thought system the humans are using in programming it, right? Elon was coming from ego in his, he has an agenda, and he's trying to push his agenda, his propaganda, and so he programs AI according to that. That's an egoic way of using AI. But you can also use AI in a way that's just helpful to people and to society. That's a way of sharing truth and facts, and you could argue about what are they really facts, but getting closer and closer to truth, right? Based on wanting to be helpful to other people and not hurtful to people, and not coming from a self-serving agenda that you may have. So, all right. Thanks for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts. Anyone out there, and take care. See you very soon. And all right. May the force be with you.